we all think we know what childhood is, right? That special, protected time for playing, learning, and just growing up. But what if I told you that the whole idea of childhood as we know it is actually a surprisingly recent invention? So, is childhood a myth? Well, not entirely, but the version we live and breathe today, it's definitely not some universal constant. Throughout history and across the globe, what it means to be a child has been radically different, constantly being shaped and reshaped by the needs of society.
I mean, you can see the difference right here. On one side, you've got our modern ideal, but then you look at ancient Rome and whoa. Childhood was just a quick stop on the way to being an adult. Kids were often getting married in their early teens. The main concern wasn't really their emotional development, it was all about survival and contributing to the family.
So, how in the world did we get from that Roman reality to our ideal today? All right, let's take a little journey back in time to see how all these social, cultural, and economic forces completely rewrote the definition of being a child. So after that ancient focus on just plain survival, the Middle Ages kind of saw kids as just miniature adults, working right alongside everyone else. Then came the Renaissance, and that was a huge turning point. People started to realize, hey, kids are different. Maybe they need some education. But then the Industrial Revolution came along and changed the game all over again. Yeah, as families flooded into the cities, children became this critical and, let's be honest, often exploited source of cheap labor. The conditions they faced in factories and mines were just horrific, and it led to this massive public outcry. That whole movement for reform is what gave us compulsory education and child labor laws, literally the foundations of our modern idea that childhood should be a protected time. But the evolution didn't stop there. If you think the concept of childhood is a recent idea, hold on, because the teenager is even newer. That's right. For pretty much all of human history, you were either a child or you were a young adult. The whole idea of adolescence as its own distinct period of development, it just didn't exist until about 100 years ago. It's kind of wild when you think about it. Today, psychologists see adolescence as this incredibly unique phase. It's not just about the physical changes, but about this huge cognitive growth and, maybe most importantly, exploring your own identity. It's that critical time when we start to figure out who we are, totally separate from our families. And what's really interesting is that this path to becoming an adult is only getting longer. First, we invented adolescence. And now, researchers have identified a whole new stage they call emerging adulthood. That period from your late teens through your 20s, where you're exploring college and careers before taking on all the responsibilities of being a full-on adult. Okay, so up to now, we've been looking at how history, the when, has shaped everything. But now let's pivot and talk about culture, the where. Because believe me, where you grow up has a massive, massive impact on your development. And when we talk about culture, we're talking about the entire social blueprint for life. It's all the shared values, traditions, and beliefs that get passed down from one generation to the next. It's basically the framework that tells us how to think, how to act, and what's important. And because all these cultural blueprints are so different, it means there is no single universal way to grow up. The path of development isn't one size fits all. What's considered totally normal for a kid in one culture might seem really different somewhere else. One of the most powerful ways to get a handle on these differences is to look at them through the lens of me versus we cultures. You might also hear this called individualistic versus collectivistic societies. They really are two fundamentally different ways of seeing yourself and your place in the world. So, in individualistic or me cultures, which you see a lot in the US and Western Europe, the big focus is on personal autonomy, independence. Success is all about what you as an individual achieve. On the flip side, you've got collectivistic or we cultures, common in East Asia, Latin America, and Africa, where the priority is group harmony. There, success is defined by what you contribute to your family and your community. This one core difference really shapes everything, from how you're raised to your very sense of self. So with all of this in mind, let's turn the lens back on ourselves for a second. This whole framework gives us a new way to re-examine our own lives and to start to see the powerful historical and cultural forces that helped shape who we are today. So what are the big takeaways here? Well, first, we've seen that our idea of childhood isn't some biological constant. It's a social construct, changed again and again by history and money.
We've also learned that adolescence is a modern invention, and that whole path to adulthood just keeps getting longer. And maybe most importantly, we've seen that culture provides the blueprint for our development. Bottom line, if you want to understand human development, you have to understand the context.
And this all leaves us with one final, really big question to chew on. We've seen how dramatically childhood has changed over the centuries. So, as our world keeps transforming with new technologies and shifting social norms, you just have to wonder, what will childhood look like in the future?